Hey guys, it is Marcus and Terry with you today in this training slash open forum talking about alcoholism. So, that's what we're going to do today. I'm having a little bit of a rough day myself. Actually, quite a bit of a rough day, but such is life. So, Terry's probably going to do most of the talking while I sit here and chain smoke cigars and chime in every once in a while. So, that's where we're at. Welcome to everyone. Let us know how you're doing, and whatever questions or comments or concerns, or if you want to share your story, feel free to type that in the comment box. And this call is going to be all about you and how to keep you sober or get you sober if you're not kept sober yet. So, Terry, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. Got a bit of a cold, so you probably hear that I'm a little raspy and working hard, catering. That's what sobriety does. When I was drinking, I was not able to work, completely unemployable, and it's good. I'm blessed to be able to work and have lots of work right now. We have our jobs are all catering jobs for Christmas parties, so there's alcohol everywhere. But it's all good because I'm sober, and I actually work with two other sober people, and we just help each other the whole time. And that's for me, that's the best way to keep your sobriety is hang out with other sober people, even if there's alcohol right there. It's not a big deal, and that's what working on sobriety every day does for me is gives me the power to be able to just live sober. It's great.
Absolutely. And I find that's kind of the key because even when things do go not as planned or we have a bad day or a bad month or a bad year, the number one thing we got to focus on is our sobriety because without that we have nothing. And I
Yep.
know that when I have rough times and when I go through hard things, my mind wants to go back into the old thought patterns. Like I could see it there in my brain. I could see that my mind wants to take those routes. And I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that if I picked up a drink, just one little harmless drink, maybe even a light beer, maybe even a beer in Utah that's only 3%, right? I
Is
know
that what
that's
they
going to
are there? Okay.
change. What's that?
Is that what they are there? I
Yeah,
don't
I
know.
remember back when I was drinking, I was in the Salt Lake City airport, and I was like, why isn't this Bud Light working? And they're like, oh, well, we have a limit on our beer where it's like 3% or something like that.
Oh,
But I know that even the Utah beer will, in fact, change my mind just enough to mess with things.
right.
And what happens is in sobriety, we build up a defense against the old way of thinking, and alcohol makes all bets off, right? It's just going to take that away. It's going to take away all the thought stuff that you've learned, all the thought stuff you've done, and it's going to put you back to like a base level, and it's going to make you think egocentric, right? And that's what alcohol does is it makes us think egocentric. Everything's about us. Everything's about what we're feeling, what we're going through, and we aren't able to let people in. We're not able to let others, you know, infiltrate our space, or we're not able to see how things affect others because we're drinking. And that's really the key is like, what are you going to do? um, and that's what we want to talk about here. Like Ty says, he's got 297 days sober. Wow, never saw myself reaching this point. And that's a common thing. Like a lot of people don't see themselves. Like I never thought I would be sitting here almost 6 years sober. I never thought that. Like I was thinking day to day, how am I going to live without alcohol? And that's what alcohol does to you, is it makes you feel that way. Now it doesn't do that to everyone, which is kind of like a cruel trick, but it does do it to us. And when we learn that, we're like, okay, now I know this is the thing. Like when you have a problem in your life, the first step is defining the problem, right? And alcoholics, we try to define the problem in many ways. It's like, no, it's not the alcohol. It's too sunny where I live, or it's too rainy where I live, or it's my marriage, it's my kids, it's my job, it's the boss, it's the damn mother-in-law, or the father, or the mom, or whoever it is. And we try to blame it on everything but the alcohol when we don't realize that it is the alcohol that is changing it. And that's why it's so important to make safeguards against that first drink, because you do have power over the first drink. You could say no, you cannot take that drink, you cannot go to the bar, and that is the power. Now, once you do cave and you say, "Oh, it's just a little one," I know Marcus says that, but he's a lightweight. I can have a Utah beer, and maybe that's going to be the one that tweaks your mind just a little bit to screw things up.
Absolutely. And it doesn't matter the percent. We got to I just want to touch on that because it's like, I don't know, 2 months ago or so, I tasted a kombucha, and it must have been one of those 0.2% whatever things. Didn't make me feel right. I was like, nope. I could feel that thing there, that was making me not really crave or anything, but I could just feel the difference. And
Yeah.
sometimes you just gotta. I just say no. I see that it's 3.2 in Utah. Okay, I think that's what it was when I was in high school. I think all the beers were right around there. But whatever, it still does the job and still gets you. Still would get me back into the depths of alcoholism. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's
Once,
not to say, because some people in their sobriety, they do enjoy like non-alcoholic beer or low percent ones. And again, we're not here to judge or do anything like that. I mean, whatever works for you, you're going to know your body and your feeling. I've heard stories where people have done the kombucha and they went back out drinking. I've heard stories where people do the kombucha and they just don't care. So it's to each his own, and I would
yep,
leave it up to your mind, right? What do you think is going to be a problem for you? And then err on the side of caution, right? Like if you're thinking about it and it's getting obsessed in your brain, maybe not a good idea.
right. Absolutely. I just want to say good morning to good morning, RVA. Great to see you. And Humble Life. Have we seen you before? I think we have.
Looks
Um,
familiar.
Ewan, Luis, Drew, good job. 2 months. Yeah, when I hit 2 months, I never thought I could get that long either. No way. And Jason, awesome. And you're saying 5.2 months. Gotcha. Good job, Jason. That's awesome. 5.2 months.
Yeah.
Excellent. Or is that 333,
3.2.
whatever? Okay. Sorry, no glasses, folks.
Lewis says I stayed 6 years sober, then tried a beer since I could be in control. After 3 years of drinking, I was drunk almost every day. Now trying to remain sober, I've accepted that I can't have a drop. Absolutely, and I think that a lot of us get into that mode where we put it off the table. It's like this is not an option for me because I know where it's going to go.
Yeah, and that's a big problem. I've seen uh, people many, many times, and I see it often that people with years, I'm talking people with a couple decades of sobriety, have that one drink, and maybe not right away they're back into it, but eventually they're back into their old habits, and that's the thing. Alcoholism, it doesn't go away. It doesn't lessen. It actually, from what they say, is the alcohol dependency gets stronger even if you remain sober. It's not like your tolerance goes down or anything like that.
Yeah,
So it's a
absolutely.
dangerous thing.
Megan says, once I pick up the first one, I can't stop. I drink, say, I can't. Let me say that again. Once I pick up the first one, I cannot stop. I can't drink safely ever in my life. I'm grateful to finally accept this. And I think acceptance is the key. Knowing that that's the problem and that is the issue is really freeing, right? A lot of people look at it and they're like, oh, I got to admit I'm an alcoholic. What's that going to look like? What's it going to be? And it's like, well, forget about what it's going to look like and what it's going to be. Figure out what it's doing for you. Like, is it worth, going through life saying, oh, well, I look okay because I can have a drink to live miserably? Like, is that worth it in the end? And I don't think it is. And I think that the key is really, really accepting it and saying, you know what? Yeah, I'm an alcoholic and I can't drink. And it's, pretty soon you'll get from the point of I'm an alcoholic and I can't drink to I'm an alcoholic and I no longer want to drink.
Right.
And that's kind of where I'm at is like I don't want to drink anymore, even though I'm having a bad day, bad week, bad however it is. I don't want to drink because I know it's going to make it worse and it's going to make me not rational and it's going to put me back in the cycle of, being an alcoholic, which sucks. Like anyone who knows what it's like to be an alcoholic and have to drink really sucks.
Yeah, I was one of those fortunate ones where as soon as I did go to rehab and I started drinking out of rehab, but after a month or so, I ended up quitting again, and I had the horrible detox. You know, after detox, I was fortunate enough to not want to drink anymore. I didn't have tools, so it still came up, but I just hung out with other sober alcoholics, and they were able to help me get some of those tools and develop my tools on how to stay sober. And since I got sober, I have not really had a desire to drink, and it's amazing. And I don't, if I had to fight this stuff every day, I don't know if I'd be sober. It's a matter of way of life for me, definitely. And I
Absolutely.
think the people that are successful in sobriety, it's a way of life. Sobriety is, they put sobriety as their top priority, and that's what I try to do too.
Yeah,
Definitely.
me too.
Um, Benny says I'm recently sober 30 days and I already feel a huge indifference and feeling better. And yeah, 30 days was big, and you'll feel even better and better. That's was my experience. Is I was still pretty sick after 30 days, but definitely after not having to deal with the detox anymore, that was huge.
Absolutely. Let's see here. Jason says it's the only drug that people ask why you do not partake. Well,
Oh.
Jason, I don't know if you ever went to high school, but that was not true for me. Although now I think the high schools have been more, lenient on that. Not lenient on letting people do it, but I don't think the peer pressure is as bad as it was. I don't know. But yeah, it is one that is socially almost almost required as like the right of being an adult is that you drink alcohol. And I think there's a lot of social stigma around it. And I think we need to look at the social stigma of where does this stuff come from? Why does this exist in the first place? And you got to go back and look at like the advertising industry, and they're really the ones who make it the cultural thing. Just like how a diamond ring is the cultural symbol for getting married, like that was fabricated by advertising. Like they purposely went out there and were like, how could we make men feel like shit for not buying the most expensive thing we have that's really not worth it? And they crafted a whole thing. And alcohol is the same way. It's like, how can we make people feel ashamed for not drinking? How can we make people feel like they're missing out if they don't drink? How can we make people this, and this? Because at the end of the day, it drives sales. And whatever, that's their bag. But we got to look at it and say, are these really my thoughts and feelings? Do I really feel like, hey, if I don't drink, I must be some kind of loser? Is that really what you think, or is that something society put on you? And we got to look at that because society conditioning affects a lot of what we do, what we think, and what we feel.
Yeah, you know, as far as the peer pressure thing goes, um, I've experienced very little peer pressure since I got sober. The few times that it has happened, it's always been in like a bar or at a party or something like that. And usually, in the beginning, I'd just say no, and the person's fine with it. And then maybe as the person's getting a little more intoxicated and that, then maybe the peer pressure gets a little bit stronger. And um, that's when I leave. That's when I stay out of those situations. And, you know, I don't go hang out at bars for that reason.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons, but you know, I have no business going into a drinking establishment when I don't drink, um, unless I'm meeting somebody for a different reason, and then I go. But um, that's that's it. Is just I just try to stay out of those situations, and of course, there's going to be things like you may be at a wedding and everybody's toasting, and the only thing they have is champagne to toast with. Okay, raise a glass and you put it down. But or some cultural, I don't know, some cultures are just really a lot stronger in their peer pressure. I'm sure there are some that are that way, but I find it pretty easy to, as long as I'm just not getting myself into those situations. And that's part of the reason why every day I think about what I'm doing the day for that day. Think about the day ahead. Like tonight, I'm catering at a bar. Okay, so what am I going to do? Well, I know the non-alcoholic drink that I'm going to have. I'm just going to drink soda water. Simple as that. And that's just kind of my game plan. Do I have any other dangerous situations I'm getting into? No, not at all. And what am I doing for sobriety today? I'm talking on this webinar and talking about sobriety. So getting my mind in the right mindset to start off, that helps a lot.
Absolutely. And mindset
So
is key. I mean,
yeah,
if you don't get your mind right, which you won't do so while you're drinking, like it's almost impossible to get your mind right while you're drinking.
right.
If that's a thing, it's like you can't use the same mind that got you drunk to get you not drunk because it's warped. It's like in the Back to the Future movie where I remember they go back to the 1985 and it's all messed up because Biff stole the book and all that stuff. And Marty tells him, he's like, can't we just travel back to the future and take the book from Biff? And he's like, we can't travel to the future from this point in time because we're going to be traveling to the future from this point in time. And this point of time is warped. So we got to go back to the past and do it. And that's kind of the same thing with alcoholism. You can't fix it from this point in time. You can't fix it with this mindset. You have to go through and you have to get a new mindset to be able to fix it. And the best thing to do is go to people who have the mindset that you need, right? Go to people who've been sober a long time and be like, well, what do you think about all day? What do you do? How'd you get where you're at? And listen. And not everything's going to work for you, right? Sometimes someone will say something. Maybe Terry or I will say something and you're like, that's kind of silly. And sometimes we'll say something that you're like, hey, that kind of works. So you got to really look at that and focus.
Right. So Chef Pete says, just got out of the ER, been battling. Oh, hey, Chef Pete, good to see you, by the way. Stomach issues due to alcohol, ulcer 11 months sober, and I'm dealing with one effect of my past drinking, but I'm doing a lot better than I was 1 year ago. Yeah, that's what happens. That's awesome, and that's the key is you're not drinking, so that's huge. I have some things. I can't bend this thumb because of drinking because I lacerated um, a tendon and didn't get it fixed because how could I go to the doctor? I'm drinking. I would rather drink. So that was one of those little things, and yeah, it happens. But great way to stay sober. See, Jason said it is one of our biggest lies in our society. They say drugs and alcohol. Alcohol is a drug, period. No separation, but exactly it's all about money and advertising. And just as Marcus just said, yes, it is. Uh,
Benny says this will be his first time in over a decade going through the holidays, especially New Year's, trying not to have one sip. Well, Benny, what I would say do is make a plan. What are you going to do? Because you could think about being sober and you could think about what you're going to do, but until you actually have a plan, like what am I going to do when someone asks me to drink? What am I going to do at the strike of midnight when everyone drinks on New Year's? How am I gonna combat that? Maybe stay home. Maybe go with sober friends. Go with people who are sober who aren't going to be drinking. Maybe get a plan to where you're not sitting around in your house all day wondering why New Year's sucks or whatever. And maybe you just accept things as they are and accept the fact that alcohol is not going to work for you, whether it's New Year's, Old Year's, Chinese New Year, Thanksgiving, whatever. It just does not work. It doesn't work on Tuesday. It doesn't work on every day that ends with a Y. And we accept that and we say, well, what am I going to do? Because the key is having that plan of what am I going to do instead of drink. Because what's happened is over time you have built up your mind to really, really need drinking and really focus on drinking as the solution. When I'm sad, I go drink. And think of all the thousands of times you've done this in your life and what that's done to your brain, right? Our brain is like a pleasure reward seeking kind of thing. And when we give it that pleasure and we get the reward, albeit how crappy it is towards the end, um, it starts to affect a lot of things, and we gotta focus on that and we gotta look at that. And I'll be back in 2 minutes. But go ahead, Terry. You got it for 2 minutes?
yeah, no
Okay.
problem. Buzzworthy says I'm sober and use hemp flower every day. It helps me to stop taking psychological meds. Interesting. I don't really know much about CBDs and all that. I don't have to take any of the other meds, so I guess I'm okay without having to take them. Not sure that there's quite a few people here that talk about the CBD. Silver Psychology talks about only CBD smoking helps me and all that. And yeah, um, not sure about it. What do you guys think? Let's see, going back. Um, oh, good to see you. Good morning. James Metzger, day two. So Benny, back to the holiday thing and stopping, not drinking during the holidays. Um, I used to get. I actually didn't like holidays very much because what I did was I had to sober up. I like to just be very, very drunk every day, and then when the Christmas, New Year's hit, I'd have to go visit other family and stuff like that, and I'd have to sober up somewhat. So I hated the holidays, and I enjoy them quite a bit now. But um, my first sober Christmas, I went over to the same people I always go to. It's kind of my substitute parents' house here in California, and they have a big get together, like 20, 25 people. And so I would go there, and everybody's drinking except for a couple people. And I just hung out with them, and it was really pretty easy. And the same thing was I just I brought something that was non-alcoholic to drink, and I made sure it was something cool like the Italian soda. I think that's what I brought. I forgot what I brought, but that was very helpful. And New Year's, same thing. Actually, New Year's Eve, I think I went to bed way before midnight, but I did not go to parties where people were drinking left and right, and I just stayed away from all that. So yeah. So Chris says acknowledging you're an alcoholic and really quitting alcohol is two different things. Quitting alcohol is two different things. Um, yeah, definitely. I knew I was an alcoholic long before I quit drinking, and then I had to quit, and that was the hardest thing in the world for me. But eventually, I was able to do it. It just took a couple of tries, and some people it takes a lot of tries. Some people are able to quit right away. But definitely, it's that's the great mystery is we know that we're destroying our body, yet we will continue to drink. That's the craziest thing about this disease. RVA says CBD is a non hallucinogenic part of pot plants, so probably a good choice. Okay, to each their own. Still, as I said, I really don't know much about CBDs and how they work and all that. I can hear you.
Well,
I
Terry could
don't
hear
know.
me, but I don't think
You know,
anyone
one of
else
the
heard me.
biggest, a big win I hear people talk about a lot, especially when people are fairly new sober, is they come into a room of AA or something like that, and they're like, I was driving and I was going by that liquor store that I always go to, and I was starting to turn into it. And that was a right turn, and instead I took a left turn and came to the meeting. And that's a huge win when you're in early sobriety. That's great.
Awesome. And
And
for
maybe
those
you
that
guys got
didn't
something
hear,
simple like that.
and for those who didn't hear me, I did have me on mute from when I got back. What we're doing is we're typing in our biggest sobriety win that happened recently. So if you had something where you're like, wow, I made it through Thanksgiving sober, or an argument sober, or maybe I'm dealing with this sober or that sober, and whatever your biggest win is, recently, type that in the box and let's celebrate those, because I understand how big of a deal it is to stay sober for an alcoholic, how big it is to look at it and be like, hey, I'm able to stay sober. And type those in. And while we're waiting for other comments and questions about alcoholism, Brent says, I just subscribed to this channel. Awesome. Good to have you as a subscriber. And if you guys aren't subscribed, make sure you subscribe and click the bell. We're here live every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, 8 a.m. Pacific Time. For the rest of you guys, you can figure out the time. I'm not that good at time zones. But he says he just subscribed last night, and here he is on the morning talk show, I guess 2 days sober. Awesome. I just seen the video on the patterns, and man, do I got them. I love happy hour. Yeah, and that's something that, you've trained your brain to love is the happy hour and the drinking. And what I found early on, even before I got sober, was the fact that alcohol wasn't all it's cracked up to be, and alcohol wasn't responsible for producing the effects that I thought it did. And I remember a time when I went to lunch and I was all shaky and messed up, and the lady had come around with my beer, which was going to be my first drink of the day, and I'm sitting there shaking and shaking, and she comes around the corner and I see the drink, and I all of a sudden start to feel better. I hadn't even taken a drink yet. I just knew I was going to be able to have access to it, and I already in my body started producing those chemicals and producing those feelings. So those are in us, not necessarily in the alcohol. The alcohol just kind of helps us do it because we haven't learned how to do it on our own. And that's not to say we're going to be like those people that, go to church and they're drunk in the Holy Spirit. If you've ever seen that, it's the craziest thing. They just act like they're drunk and they're not. But you would swear they were drunk. Like some of them, you probably couldn't even pass a sobriety test, and they haven't had one drop. They just have convinced themselves that the effect is happening. So the effects are in us, and we can be calm and we can be chill and relaxed without having to drink, which I think is really important for us to understand, that it's not all coming from the alcohol. And if we separate it and say, well, the alcohol is giving me good and bad, but the bad is outweighing the good, which is probably why you're here listening to us, because the bad's outweighing the good, then let's look at what can I do to get the good instead. Instead of going to happy hour, maybe I can listen to a talk or go to a meeting or, play basketball or whatever your thing is. And maybe I can do something different and get those feelings because, exercise produces the feeling, which I suck at exercise, but I'm trying to get better at it, like by actually doing it. Focus on that.
Right. Yeah, alternatives to drinking are huge. Just like RVA says, every time I make it through an airport uh, sober, it's a win, and that's huge. And there's, I think that's one good thing that our smartphones are good for is, what did I used to do at an airport? Go to the bar and drink, because that was the only thing to do, especially when the flight's delayed by whatever hours.
Mm-hmm.
But nowadays, at least you can go somewhere else, sit somewhere else, and deal with your emails, Facebook, whatever. Research what your next Christmas present you're going to buy,
Or listen to a
stuff
talk
like
sober
that.
talk.
Listen to a talk sober. Oh yeah, talk sober talk. Yeah,
Also, one other cool thing in airports, I've never tried it, but I heard about it. If you tell the people to page a friend of Bill and tell them
yeah.
where you're at, they'll find an alcoholic to come meet you. Now, I've never tried it, so I don't know how reliable it is, but I have heard that if you do page a friend of Bill and tell them where you're at, usually an alcoholic will know that that's like the cue to go talk to a dude and help him out. But yeah, listening to Talk Sober Talks would be a good one, or reading, a book or whatever it is that you're going to occupy your time with that's not drinking.
Right. Benny says I had a big bottle of vodka and poured it down the drain. For me, that was a really hard thing to do. A few days into sobriety, yet it was a big win.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I don't think I wanted to do that, but I never did. I just drank everything I had every time. So that's unbelievable. Good job.
RVA says I fly every week, so it's my biggest weakness.
Oh yeah.
What I would do, RVA, is fill your brain before, after, and during. When you know you're going to go drive to the airport, listen to a talk, whatever it is. I like to listen to Alan Watts or Ram Dass or Anthony DeMello. Or, if Talk Sober is your thing, listen to that before you get on the plane. listen to it on the plane. And the cool thing about it is you get the time that you're flying to actually learn something, right? And now that
Right.
I'm sober, whenever I fly, I learn something, which is really cool.
Yeah, I have a friend that he's 34 years sober, and he spent, I think he said he spends about, or used to, he's retired now, but he spent about a third of his life at flying for business and stuff like that. And it's exactly what he did. Is he just figured out what else he would occupy his time and try to learn a little bit more about himself and about things he was interested in, and that worked really well for him. And he's reasonably happy sober. Okay, he's a little bit of a grumpy old man, but it's all right. So am I.
Lee says, I had a blip. Can I still listen to you guys? Of course. Yeah, I don't know what a blip is. Does that mean a relapse? Um, I mean, that's kind of what we're here for. Like, relapse for some people will happen. It's not about the relapse and about the shame and the guilt. It's about what are you going to do? Because if you live in the past and say, oh, well, I drank and I used to be sober and I used to have this and oh, woe is me, that's not going to help you get forward. But if you look at it and you're like, hey, that was a point in time, door is closed, now we're going to be sober. You didn't really lose a whole lot unless you give into it, right? Unless you give into it. And I think there needs to be a differentiation between a relapse and a prolonged relapse. Because a relapse is like, okay, maybe, you get sober and then you have a little bout and you go drink because you don't have the tools. Okay, you come back and you're like, okay, let's do this again. Now I need to focus on the tools that I was missing. But for someone that's in a prolonged relapse, what happens is they succumb to the old way of thinking, and they're like, okay, this is what it is, and I gave in, and this is so much better, and then they lose their way of understanding, and they don't know which way is up, which way is down, and it really gets them pretty bad because their mind's gone.
Yeah.
So
It doesn't matter where you were, or whether how many times you started drinking again. The key is are you sober now? And if you're sober now, start where you are. That's it. You're sober today. That's all I got. I'm sober today. So just start here and move forward. Try to stay sober the next hour. Try to stay sober the hour after that. Stay sober the
absolutely.
whole day. Tell yourself you can have a drink tomorrow. Tomorrow gets here, do the same thing. You can do it. It's dangerous stuff. Some people they start drinking again and they don't get sober again. It's a horrible way to end it all.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see.
All right, Brent
Oh,
says, because I'm drunk, it's all good in the hood. Well, that's what alcohol does. Is they makes us feel like everything's good when it's really not. And the fact that you're here and listening probably means it's really not all good in the hood, and you might need to change your hood and get the alcohol out of it. Because I think that it's warping your mind to think that, unless you're not an alcoholic, but that's for you to decide. So you got to look at that. Lee says, I'm a bit of a drunk, disappointed with myself. Well, I mean, if you drink enough alcohol, you're going to be a drunk. That's just like a fact, right? Drink enough alcohol, you'll be a drunk. Um, so I would look at it as neither here nor there. Don't be disappointed. Just look at what am I going to do now. And I forgot who it was. There was a self-help teacher that said, so many people focus on 90% of their time on the problem and only 10% on the solution. And oftentimes we do that too. We're like, oh, I'm an alcoholic. I'm going to focus all my time on what it means to be an alcoholic and how bad I am and all this other stuff. Instead of like, what am I going to do? And if you flip that and you're like, okay, I'll feel a little bad and disappointed for 10%, but the rest of the time I'm going to focus on sobriety. And that's what Terry and I do is like, I used to focus on the problem all day long while I was drinking. When I got sober, I started focusing on the solutions. What am I going to do about it? And I heard something good in a meeting a bit ago where someone said, I don't have problems, I have situations. Right? Instead of
yeah.
looking at it as a problem, look at it as a situation. What are we going to do about this situation? I got this drinking situation. I can't stop drinking. What am I going to do about it? What am I going to do about it? Okay, here's what I'm going to do.
Right. Exactly. Ty says 297 days, and I can't stop apologizing for things I recognize I did. Still pushing forward and having bouts with paranoia still. Yes, well, the last two things, pushing forward and bouts of paranoia, that stuff's gonna, well, you got to keep pushing forward, and paranoia it's gonna get mellower. It'll be better. Um, you know, we all have regrets for what we did when we were drinking, and it's usually not pretty. But all you can do is just do the best you can right now. And eventually, sometimes it takes a long time. You get the trust of other people, and people start to accept you as a better person now. Maybe you don't get forgiven for what you did, but all you can do is be a good person. That's it. And eventually, it's going to come around. I think I'm fairly well respected with most of my friends, but who knows?
Hey, I
I don't know.
respect you.
But oh, thank you so much. But yeah, and you can go and apologize to people, but just be careful. Make sure you're not going to hurt them when you're apologizing. Don't make it about them. Make it about what you did, and that's an important thing. It's just apologize for yourself without expecting anything in return. That's it. I'm sorry I did this. I, maybe not even saying I'm sorry, but I just wanted to let you know that I did this and I regret what I did, and I'm trying to do better now. So that's a good way to look at it there.
TW says, "Is this how to quit on your own or AA based sobriety?" I subscribe to the quit on your own, but I think AA is a good tool. Terry is more AA based, so we decide to give you guys both alternatives and let you choose what you want. Um, so it's both.
Let's see. Benny says I used to have long relapses when I thought I can just drink in moderation. That never worked. I don't think I can even have a non-alcoholic beer. Not yet. Yeah, that was me too. And I have not had a non-alcoholic beer since I got sober. Don't plan to. I remember when I was drinking, I'd try to use them, and they suck. Why would I drink that when there's so many other non-alcoholic choices? Just, geez, I'd rather have a 7 Up or
Mm-hmm.
a Coke or something like that, or something with a splash of cranberry or whatever.
Brent says, "I've been going to Celebrate Recovery and now have a sponsor that does Celebrate Recovery as well as AA, so I think I got a good start." Absolutely. And I would be careful too for some of you. I mean, some people this will not even apply to. For me, I started going to Celebrate Recovery before I got sober, but I didn't realize that I had a lot of religious baggage in my background, and that was a trigger for me. So it was very difficult to stay sober when all of the, you know, religious stuff was front and center because Celebrate Recovery is primarily a religious, I believe it's Christian organization, and it's basically the Christian version of the 12 Steps. I think it was started by Rick Warren, who was the pastor of Saddleback. Um, so
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
yeah, I think he was the guy who swore in Obama. I believe so. He was like his spiritual advisor or something like that.
And that's what Celebrate Recovery is?
Uh-huh. Yeah, they basically took the 12 steps,
Right,
matched a bunch of Bible verses with it, and made
right.
it like a more religious program.
Okay, gotcha. Oh, in fact, they put out a recovery Bible, I believe,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Lee says a beer leads to more beer, never enough for me. Any ideas on cravings? Uh, you're going to have them when you quit. The best thing to do is well, the first thing to do is to go to a doctor and be honest with him and talk to him and have him start to steer you in the right direction. It looks like you're being pretty honest with us here, and you got to be honest with him when you get there. You got to be honest with yourself as far as how much you're drinking and whether you need to quit or not. But that's as far as cravings go. It's they're going to happen. I mean, they have meds and stuff, but that's for the doctors to decide whether you need them or not. Definitely.
Hmm.
But what I've done in sobriety after getting through detox and stuff like that is when a craving has come up is what we've talked about many times here is just pause, do something else for 15 minutes. That's it. It's really that simple for me is go and mow the lawn or walk the dog or something like that. And the cravings usually go away after that short amount of time. The 15-minute rule.
James, did we get James's yet?
No.
James says, my frequent prolonged relapses have backed me into corner. Seen a doctor, and he and I suspect bipolar disorder. If it is, then I'll get good help, so I'll be pleased for that. Yeah, a lot of times what they call that in psychology circles is self medicating. And sometimes people use alcohol or drugs to self medicate, which is a terrible idea because you're not a doctor and alcohol isn't meant to help any mental disorders. It, in fact, causes them. So it's not a real good idea to go to alcohol for that. With that said, if you have been drinking a lot, definitely go to your doctor and tell him that. Because I found that when I was drinking, there was a lot of things I thought that I had. And when I stopped drinking for a while, they started to go away. So just kind of depends. But obviously, listen to your doctor. And if he says you got something, do the whatever you should do if you got that. Lay says, my sister has been an alcoholic for 40 years. She's never tried sobriety. She blames others for her problems. Yep, that's typical of an alcoholic. I blamed everyone else for my problems. And, you know, it was really hard to look at myself because if I looked at myself, I didn't like what I saw. Till I stopped drinking, then I started to like what I saw and started to forgive myself and understand what was going on and started to really look at, you know, the cause and the effect I had on other people because I wasn't a peach to be around, you know. And so I had to come to grips with that.
Yep. Lee, you're asking what meds? Honestly, Lee, I don't know the names of the meds. It's something that you really have to go to a doctor for. And I think there's some things, but I don't know. Sorry.
Yeah, and we're not doctors or trained people. We're just two guys who stayed sober so
Yep.
far. So, you know, we just want to share our hope and what we've learned and what's worked for us so that hopefully something will click. And I think for a lot of you guys, it is starting to click. And you're like, okay, I get it. Like when I have a craving, it doesn't have to be a big thing. Of course, I'm going to have a craving. I drank a lot.
Yeah.
Obviously, you know, if I watch a lot of TV, my brain's going to start to think about what I watch on TV. If I read a lot of books, my brain's going to think about what I read in the books. If I have someone who yells at me all the time, I'm going to think people are going to yell at me all the time. And that's really what's going on. And a craving is neither here nor there. It just is what it is. And if you let it be, you know, it's like an itch. You don't have to scratch it. And the funny thing about itches is when you scratch them, they get worse. Like if you leave it alone, you're just like, yeah, whatever. My back's a little bit itchy, you know. But if you start scratching it, it gets worse, and then you're like, what the hell, man? This gets worse. And alcohol's the same way. If you just leave it alone, it should be all right.
Right. Quessy says,
Lee,
well, oh,
oh,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. No, you go ahead.
Okay. I was just going to read Quessy or Quessy. Sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. Well, I went to a great rehabilitation place and I learned a lot and stayed focused. Every day helped me. And now, come February, I'm happily sober for 4 years. Pay attention and stay focused. And yeah, we both went to rehabs, both Marcus and I. Marcus stayed sober after it. I drank, but I did get sober soon after. And the key was for both of us. Yeah, pay attention, stay focused. We stayed focused on our sobriety. Marcus and I may have slightly different paths in our sobriety as far as exactly specifically what we do, but we do still stay focused on the same thing as sobriety is our top priority. And so far it's worked. And that's the key
Absolutely.
is we realize it's only so far. We have to keep it up. And that's it. Pay
Absolutely.
attention, stay focused.
Lee says he's been mixing some prescribed drugs with some other stuff. Is that dangerous? I would talk to a doctor about that because I don't know what mixes with what. So I would, you know, talk to a doctor. There's even online doctors you can talk about it, or you can call a doctor and talk about it. Be careful what you read on the internet because just like me and Terry, not everyone's an expert. But unlike me and Terry, some people like to say they are experts in everything. It's like my dad. If you say you have a condition, my dad will get out his little kit and he'll be like, "Oh, you got to take 4 of these and 4 of these." And I'm like, "Dad, you're not a doctor. Like, if I want to sell my house, I'll go to you because you're a realtor, but you're not a doctor. Love you, but you know you got to look at that, and you got to be careful where you get your information from. And if you're ever talking about drugs and detox and stuff like that, go to the doctor. They're going to know what's going on with your body and your mind.
Right. Brent, we usually end right around 9. So just to let you know. TW, this is my fourth time trying to get sober with some success. I'm 2 months in this time. I find myself hating and angry more than I'd like. Oh, you just skipped up. It comes out of nowhere. Yeah, that's your emotions coming back. And that was me too. Just emotional roller coaster, and that's what I hear from so many people that are, especially early in sobriety. But it creeps up even after some time, and it does go away. Um, but try to take time out for yourself, and that's what I do. Is I try to do things that I like doing of every day, like walk my dog. Some other activity that's other than just meetings and or work, something where it's going to help me mentally. A lot of people, we actually just had a webinar on meditation, but meditating or something like that. But that's what I do. I ride my bike a lot, and things like that. Exercise is huge to help you with your anger issues, but they're going to happen. And that's one thing we have to realize is that, we get sober, all of a sudden we got all these feelings that we've been pushing down for so many years, and they're going to happen. And for me, I've just kind of learned to I learned that they're just feelings. It's okay. It's not who I am. It's I can handle them. They're okay. They're not
And I
going to
think
kill me.
I think also another thing to realize is when he says it comes out of nowhere, it's not coming out of nowhere. Anger and hate usually comes out of sadness and feeling wronged. And I would figure out, okay, well, what am I really sad about? What's really bothering me? And get honest with yourself and your emotions and say, what's going on here? You know, maybe I am sad because I drank and I lost time, or, maybe this happened or that happened, or maybe I'm mad at alcohol because it let me do that. Or caused me to do that, or whatever. He also says that he fantasizes about destruction. Well, fantasize about something else. In life, we're going to have things that pop up in our mind, and it's up to us what we choose to cling to and what not to cling to. And you could cling to those. Maybe it distracts you to think about that stuff, but figure out what it's doing for you and figure out something else to think about. And when it comes up and you're like, oh, hey, I'm thinking about this thing I don't want to think about, just say, well, I don't think about that anymore. And just keep saying that, because it's all just words and things you see and chemical impulses in the brain. It's all that's going on there.
Right. Let's see. We're at Thai family stupid people. Childhood trauma and MS were my reasons for drinking. MS causes drunk feeling and slurred speech, so it made me feel sober until hearing from wife and kids how I really was. Yeah, when they point that out, especially when people show you a video of yourself or myself when drinking. Yeah, I always thought I was much cooler than I really was, and definitely the blame game. It's mentioned down here a little further down. Chan um, played the blame game too, and that's what I did too. It was always somebody else's fault. But I know it had the alcohol has a little bit to do with it. That's what I used to think as I was walking to the liquor store saying, this will just be the last bottle I'm going to get. But I was in that endless cycle, and that's just what happened. Keeps going and going. Um, Buzzworthy says, yes, Lee, I used to take Valium while drinking. It is very dangerous. And yeah, you got to go see a doctor about mixing drugs, definitely. And you probably know what they're going to say, but you still got to go.
Absolutely.
Um, So Chen, you said lost count, number of times I tried quitting, having depression. I don't know what that help. So played the blame game a lot. Having said that, my last drink was 10 days back. So far, so good, guys. And good job. 10 days is huge. Just like 1 day is huge. Anything is great. And
Deciding to get sober is huge.
yep, absolutely.
Lee says an interesting one. He says, I go on walks, but I still crave the drug. What's going on? Well, walks do not get rid of cravings, they just give you exercise. The cravings are going to come because you're craving the feeling and what the drug does to you. So if you really look at it and be like, well, of course I'm going to have cravings. Like, cravings are not bad, it's normal. That's what's going to happen. Like people who are in abusive relationships, they're going to get out with a certain set of issues. People who do alcohol are going to get out with a certain set of issues. Cravings is one of them. Now, you can look at those issues and be like, oh, I'm so damaged, I'm so hurt, all this stuff's going on. Or you could look at it and be like, okay, now I know what's going on. What are we going to do about it? Now I know I got the craving. If I go on a walk and I have the craving, well, I can't get the drug on the walk unless I'm walking down the wrong street. But, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do? It doesn't really matter. Like, I can have cravings all day long if I don't drink. It doesn't matter. Some people have cravings 24/7. And it's not about the craving, it's about what you do with it. And like Buzzworthy says, they do lessen the longer you're sober. Absolutely.
Right. I mean, the solution it does come down to simplicity as far as don't drink. But it's a complicated problem. I have um this physical addiction. If I'm to drink, my body's going to crave it. And that's also going to trigger the mental addiction of the obsession. I'm going to obsess about the alcohol if I have that one drink, and it's going to make me continue to drink. So what do I have to do? Well, simple. I just need to not drink. But then how do I not drink? Well, I have to develop a life, a mindset that's going to keep me from taking just that one drink, and then all of the ones after that. I need this mindset to not do that. So that's where starts to become. It can be it can be complicated, but I have to do things that work towards my sobriety. So that's where thinking about the dangerous situations I may get in today, but not focusing on it all day long, not having to fight the alcohol, the cravings. I understand that the cravings are going to be kind of, they're going to be a lot when I first quit drinking. But as time goes on, it gets less and less, and that's why I hang out with other alcoholics because they've experienced it. And they can tell me, "Yeah, I felt that too. It'll go away," or "This is what I did to deal with this issue or this feeling," and then I do it, and it works. So it can be it can seem very complicated, but for me, it's just a matter of developing a lifestyle that's a sober lifestyle and get that mindset right.
Absolutely. Lee says, I think about alcohol all the time. Why? Well, Lee, did you drink alcohol all the time? That's probably why.
Yep.
We are what we think about, and we are what we do, to an extent. And if you think about alcohol all the time, or you drank all the time, yeah, you're going to think about it all the time. Ty
Okay, so
says,
oh,
would you recommend to a person too afraid or physically can't quit? What would you recommend? Someone close to me is having the issue. Get them to a doctor, and maybe look into, talking to them about it with the doctor. And being like, hey, man, you're going to have these issues. I was terrified to quit,
me too.
and I physically couldn't.
Yep.
And luckily, I got slammed in a mental institute and then had to go to rehab. So it kind of forced me to do that. But I would get them to a doctor and see what you can do to get them to realize the problem and realize what it's doing to them.
Yeah, what you're talking about, Ty, is pretty much most people that are alcoholics. That's where we all were. Pretty much everybody that I've talked to, they're too afraid, can't deal with life without alcohol. Or for me, I was extremely afraid of detox because I tried to detox before and then get a day or two into it and oh, better start drinking again. This hurts too much. Absolutely, the
And
fears.
always, if you're detoxing, always go to the doctor because you don't know what havoc this wreaks on your body.
So if there's any last minute questions, bring them on.
Yep. And Lee, awesome job on staying sober 6 days.
Yeah,
Um, and some people are binge drinkers. Some people drink all the time. Terry and I were the type that drank all the time. We did binge, but it was in the middle of drinking, so we never really
yeah.
stopped. We just had a lot more sometimes. And Lee, I think Terry and I also started out like you, where we didn't drink all the time. So I would watch it and be like, okay, well, what's the deal? Can I not stop? What's happening?
Yes, Ty, I understand. Jeez.
Tracy says experiencing cravings and tests can be seen as an opportunity to try out new coping skills and sober beliefs. Absolutely, Tracy. That's a great line of thought there. I like that. We're about ready to wrap it up. So about 2 minutes left. If anyone has any last minute, like major questions you want to go over, otherwise we'll have to wait till next week. Or you could check out our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/talksober. And you could get us on there as well. So, with that said, I think we are good to go. TW says time is of the essence. Thinking about the very little time we have when in life is the best motivation for me. So many goals. It would be a real shame not to give it a go and accomplish some of them. With alcohol, it's not possible. Absolutely. Yeah, alcohol
Right.
is going to stop you from a lot of shit.
It's a great final thought there.
All right. I think we're ready to go. Um, yeah, Roadbots, stick around. Listen to some of the stuff we have to say. Watch some of the previous videos. I think it'll help you understand what's going on so that you guys can get the help you need. So,
Yeah.
thanks for being here. We'll see you guys next week, 11 a.m. Our topic next week is about, what is it? Operant conditioning in the mind. So, we're going to go into some mind stuff,
Right
scary
on.
mind stuff. So, we'll see you guys next week. Stay sober. Have a good one.
All right. Bye-bye, everybody.